Hello guys, welcome to my channel. So today I'll be showing you how to draft a basic dress. So I'm working with a length of 40 inches, and to determine the width you're going to be working with, you just divide the biggest circumference of your body by 4. So that's quarter of your biggest circumference. So mine is my hip divided by 4, that's 11. Then you add 2 inches to it. This line is going to serve as the shoulder line, and I'll be taking my measurements, my vertical measurements from here. So I'll place my tape like this, and from the shoulder to my bust point is 10 inches, and from the shoulder to my waist is 17 inches, and shoulder to my hip is 25 inches. So the next thing I'm going to do is to extend the lines. So I'll label, this is the bust point, this is the waist, and this is the hip. The thing I'm going to do is to impute the shoulder measurement divided by 2. So I'm working with 7 inches. I'll place my tape here and I'll mark 7 inches, and I'll come down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant. Next, I'll be imputing the neckline, and the standard for a basic dress is 3 inches width and 3 inches depth, but I'll be making use of 3 inches width and 4 inches depth. So I'll place my tape like this, and I'll mark my 3 inches, and for the depth I'll place my tape like this and mark 4 inches. Then I'll connect with my curve from here to this 4 inches. From this 3 inches depth, I'm going to be connecting to this 1 inch for my shoulder slant. Next thing you're going to be doing is to determine your armhole depth, and the formula for this is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So mine is 8 inches, so I'll be coming down at this point by 8 inches. So I'll place my tape here and mark 8 inches. So I'll join the dots. So now this is my chest line, so I'll label it chest line. Next, I'm going to impute the bust point measurement, otherwise known as the nipple to nipple measurement, divided by 2. So mine is 7 inches divided by 2, 3.5 inches plus ½ inch allowance. The hip here, I'll mark 4 inches. At the waist, I'll mark 4 inches also, and on the bust point I'll also mark 4 inches, and I'll connect with a line. So to determine the length of the dart, for the front piece you'll be coming down by 1 inch at the bust point, and at the hip line or the hip point you'll be coming up by 2 inches. So I'll come up by 2 inches here, and this is the bust point. I'm dropping down by 1 inch here. Then I'm going to come here and I'll take ½ inch on the left, ½ inch here at the right hand, and I'll connect from here to here, and also the same thing. So that for our front piece. Next, I will impute the horizontal measurement. So I'll come at this chest line and I'll impute quarter of my bust circumference, which is 10 inches. I'll also add 2 inches for seam allowance. So if you're not going to make use of lining, 1 inch is enough for your seam allowance, but if you're going to make use of lining, 2 inches is okay. So at this waistline, quarter of my waist circumference is 8.5. Then I'm going to add this 1 inch for my dart, then my 2 inches seam allowance. Then on the hip line, quarter of my hip circumference is 11 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance. So at the hemline, quarter of my hip circumference minus 1 inch is what I'm going to place here. That'll be 10 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance. That's 12 inches. So I subtracted 1 inch from quarter of my hip circumference for the hem because I want a pencil shaped gown. But if you want it so straight and basic, you could just impute what you have on your hip directly on your hemline. So the next thing I will do is to connect the dots. So I'll be using my hip cuff to connect from the waist to the hip. And I'll connect from the hip to the hem. So I'll come back to this armhole depth and mark half of it, which is 4 inches. So from this 4 inches, I'll be connecting to the chest line. So when cutting your front piece on your fabric should be on fold. Then I will label this front. And at the shoulder here, we're going to be imputing ½ inch for the joining of the dress. So we're going to cut out the front piece. So this is how our front piece looks like. Next we'll be cutting the back piece. So now this is for our back piece. So I have a zipper allowance of 1 inch here for the back piece. So just like we did for the front, this is going to be our shoulder line. And on this shoulder line, I'll place my tape like this and I'll mark my bust point, which is 10 inches. Then from the shoulder line to my waist is 17 inches. Then from the shoulder line to my hip is 25 inches. So the vertical measurement I'm working with is not constant. This is my measurement. So from the waist to the hip line is usually between 8 to 9 inches. You can always take your tape, place on your body and get your own perfect measurement. So I'm going to extend this mark. So just like the front, I will impute the shoulder measurement, which is 7 inches. So my measurements will be starting from this line, this way. So 7 inches. I'll place my tape here and I will impute 7 inches here. Then I'll be coming down by 1 inch for the shoulder slant. At this point, I'm going to impute the armhole depth, which is 8 inches, and I'll connect. So this is our chest line, this is our bust point, this is our waist, and this is our hip. I'll impute the neckline. So the neck depth will be 1.5 inches and the neck width will be 3 inches, just like the front. So we'll be taking our measurements also from this line. So I'll place 3 inches like this, 1.5 inches. I'll be connecting from here to here for our shoulder slope. I will impute the bust pan measurement, which is also nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. Mine is 7 inches divided by 2, which is 3.5 inches plus ½ inch, which is 4 inches. I will be marking 4 inches the waist, the hip, and also on the bust point. then I'll connect. I'll go upwards by 2 inches on the hip points. The dart is going to start from the bust point, and I'll connect to the waist here. Unlike the front piece, which I came down by 1 inch from the bust point. At the waist, I'll take 1/2 inch on the left and 1/2 inch on the right for the dart, and I'll connect. From the bust point to the waist, so I'll connect from the waist to the hip point. I'll indicate back piece. From this line, I'll be marking 1/4 of my bust measurement, which is 10 inches plus 2 inches seam allowance. On the waist, I'll mark 1/4 of my waist circumference, which is 8 inches. And I'll mark my 8 inches here. 1 inch for the darts plus 2 inches for our seam allowance. And on the hip line, 1/4 of my hip measurement is 11 inches. Please take your measurement from here. 11 inches, then plus 2 inches for my allowance. And at the hem, I'll subtract 1 inch from 1/4 of my hip measurement, which will give me 10 inches. I'll mark 10 inches here. I subtracted 1 inch from here, and I'll also add 2 inches for the seam allowance, and I'll connect the marks. Here I'll mark the midpoint of the line, which is 4 inches. So from here, I'll connect with my curve to form the armhole curve. Then I'll be adding 1/2 inch at the shoulder, then I'll cut out the excess. At the zipper point, you split the pattern into 2. You're meant to have 2 identical pieces like this for the back pattern. We've come to the end of this tutorial. Please like, share, and subscribe to support my channel.